What's up, everyone? This is your host, Camden McInnes, and I'm here with another amazing guest who wrote yet another amazing book. But before I introduce my guest, I'd like to tell you guys how and why I actually invited her onto this show. So, about 3 to 4 months ago, I had received an eviction notice that was slid underneath my door. And it was actually my first time I'd ever experienced anything like that happen to me. And my heart, like, even when I think about it right now, it was such a crazy moment for me that my heart was like beating out of my chest. And at the time, I had no job and I wasn't sure how I was going to pay my rent. And actually, that exact same day, about a few hours later, there was a notification that popped up on my smartphone, and it was titled Sarah Centrella, Hustle, Believe, Receive. And to kill the stress, I decided to plug in my headphones and go for a walk. It was actually a daily ritual that I do every single day, usually in the morning times, but this time is about in the afternoon. So that day, I walked through my drug-infested neighborhood, and I remember literally stepping over a man who was sleeping right in front of the front door of my apartment. And this was the kind of area in town where this is very common. And I remember looking around and seeing people beg on the street for food or money or anything they could actually get their hands on. That day, I couldn't tell if the neighborhood was just in a little extra cracked out than usual, or if my mind was just making me more aware of where I might end up if I did not resolve these issues. So the great part about my neighborhood is that there was a beautiful park nearby that I often visited. And to clear my head, I would go by the dock and sit and just look at the river. And I'd just do stuff like feed the ducks and the animals. And I just kind of just ponder and reflect on my life. When I got to the dock, I sat down and I took out my smartphone and I pressed play on that interview. And I heard Sarah tell her story, and it really inspired me to work harder and smarter and just to kind of believe in myself again, because at that certain moment, I felt really, really down. And Sarah's story is truly inspiring, but I'm going to let her tell it. So, Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. And just hearing you say that intro, oh my God, you have no idea how much I relate to everything you were just saying. I got one of those lovely notices that you're talking about a year and a half after my rock bottom hit. And so I know exactly what you're talking about. It's such fear and it's such a scary position to be in. So thank you for having me on, and thank you for continuing to inspire other people, as your story will do as well.
Thank you very much. And I definitely want to get right into your story because your story is just amazing. So can you tell us your personal story and how you came to write this book, Hustle, Believe, and Receive?
Yeah, absolutely. So my story kind of starts in 2000. Oh my gosh, it's been 8 years now. So 2008, when my husband, we were high school sweethearts. We'd been together for 16 years and had 3 little kids. I had twins that were just over a year old, and then I had a 5-year-old son. I found out one day that he had been having an affair through a text message. And that text message changed my life instantly. I mean, my marriage was over in about 15 minutes. And I had been a stay-at-home mom for the previous year. We were in, the middle of a horrible recession. I live in Oregon. We were going through one of the worst recessions we'd seen in a long time. So financially, things were already rock bottom for us as a married couple, but nothing in comparison to what happens when in 15 minutes your life has totally changed, and the bottom has completely fallen out. I found myself with no job, no income, no even bank accounts that were in my name at that point. My car wasn't in my name. It was just one of those things that you don't plan for that. You plan for the opposite of that, especially when you're married. You think, okay, we're going to be together forever. So you move forward in that direction, and then all of a sudden everything changes. And it was, to say the least, it was incredibly devastating. I remember just laying on the floor for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours until I finally had this moment. I don't know if anyone else out there could relate to being at rock bottom, where you have, whether it's faith that you believe in or whatever it is, there's something that tells you, hey, like, get up and get it together. This is you're going to have to reinvent your life. And there was a thought that went through my mind that, okay, well, if I have to do that, and I'm going to go to all that work to reinvent my life and to start over literally from scratch with nothing, then screw it. I want a whole new life. I want totally different. I'm shooting in a completely different direction. And that kind of singular thought from wherever it came from is really kind of what saved me. And I clung on to that when I began to rebuild my life.
I know I had interviewed a guest in the past, and I remember him talking about his pain moment, where he really, like, his defining moment was he was in a dumpster. His job was to hop in the dumpster and clean out the dumpsters and unload the garbage. And at that moment, it was just one day, it just hit him that he just needed to kind of change his life. He was a high school dropout, and he eventually ended up going from a high school dropout to becoming a doctor. But he talks about how he literally remembers that moment, that just defining moment where he's in the dumpster in the summer heat in Toronto, Canada, and he was just like, wow, like, what the fuck happened to my life? Is there a moment that you can describe specifically that through your divorce and through after when you hit rock bottom, that you can kind of remember, that you can just kind of describe to us that moment where you just like, shit, I have to get my life together?
You know, it really was. It was probably a couple hours after he had left. So I had read the text message, and he was in the shower actually. So when I found his phone and read it, I went in, turned off the water in the shower, and was like, "Get the fuck out!" And that's all I said. I don't remember saying anything else. And he literally left the house like dripping wet. And that was the end. And I remembered, like, you know, just laying on the floor. I think my sister came or somebody came, and thank God, like, took care of the kids, put them to bed or whatnot. But I didn't move. I laid on that floor till late into the night, and that was kind of when, because I just kept on trying to solve my problem. You know, there's of course part of you that's devastated for the personal side of what's happening, but way beyond that, I was just like, okay, I need to solve this problem. Like, how do I get formula tomorrow? You know, how do I pay the rent? I already know it's late. Like, how do I do these basic things? And that was really the moment. And I can remember it clear as day, like, you know, feeling the wood on my face and just thinking, like, oh my God, like, this is real. Like, this is not some horrible bad dream. This is real. And, you know, if you don't fucking get up and take care of your family, who do you think is going to do that? No one's going to do that. It's not anybody's responsibility. It's not families. It's not friends. It's not the government's. It's no one's responsibility. So stop crying, get up and figure it out. And that's, you know, I went right into the next couple of days of selling everything that we owned and just trying to figure it out, and get back on my feet. And it was a while. It was about 3 months before I got a job. And that was 3 months of actively searching every day to get a job. And then when I did get one, it just covered rent and daycare. And that
was
it.
Your first job?
That was it. It was in corporate sales, doing like phone calling. So yeah, like inside sales. And, you know, the salary was poverty wage for a family of 4, but I was like, I'll take anything and I'm going to hustle my butt off until it changes. But there was something in me, I think, that kind of what you were just talking about, that moment when I realized that I had to rebuild this life and that I wanted it better, there was hope. And that, like, hope is a really amazing thing, because once you've hit rock bottom, I think the fear is gone of falling further down, you know what I mean? Because you've already been there. So I think a lot of us go through our life and we're afraid all the time that the worst is going to happen. But let me tell you, when the worst is going to happen, the fear's gone. So then all you have left is hope. Yep. And it was that hope that I was clinging on to, that I thought, you know what, I've already been to the bottom. Guess what? It didn't kill me. I physically am still alive. You know, my kids and I are still together. Everything is okay. So if I could survive that, I can survive anything. So from now on out, I'm only focusing on hope and where I want to go, not where I've been. And it changed my life. It really did.
Yeah, I remember before that eviction notice came, and even afterwards, I remember my meal was every single day fried pasta noodles with chopped up broccoli stock and salt. And I remember going through, you know, I wouldn't call it depression.
Mm-hmm.
I guess a bit of desperation, but I wasn't necessarily depressed. And I remember telling myself that I kind of have to learn how to master being at rock bottom and kind of learn how to thrive at it. And I have interviewed like a lot of people from all different types of spiritual backgrounds and belief systems who have going through those tough times. They kind of had something that they had faith in, whether
Mhm.
it just be themselves or whether it be their religion. What were those kind of beliefs that you had, and how important was faith in your role when you were kind of starting your life over from scratch?
That's a great question because I grew up very, very religious, but as an adult was not at all. Absolutely not.
Yeah, same.
And so, if you would have asked me then, I would have said none because I didn't think that it was playing a role. But to me, belief is kind of what I go on, and that's where the word believe comes in the book. And for me, it was believing in myself. And, that can come from belief in God or in whatever religion that you have. But for me, it was belief in that hope, I guess, that there was going to be a better tomorrow, and that even though I didn't feel adequate enough to make it happen, that I could and I would. And then that over time became belief in my dream, belief in, these other things. So I 100% believe that it plays a huge role in every one of our journeys, whether we recognize it or not, or whether we put any type of religious or non-religious connotation to it. Even if it's something as definitive, I guess, as say an Olympic athlete. We were all just watching the Olympics, the last couple of weeks, and you see any one of those athletes, every single one of them believed they would be there. So, that could have been their belief system. They could have others as well, but without that belief, they would have never got there. So that's kind of what became the core of my system on how anybody can achieve anything is you got to have hustle. So you got to be willing to work your butt off. And trust me, I have, and I still do. But you got to believe that it's getting you somewhere, and believe that it will absolutely happen. And then you got to be grateful and aware, because when you start to receive what you've been working for, you'll miss it if you're not grateful and aware. So that's kind of the cornerstone of what got me through that difficult time. And then as the years have progressed, I've been able to really kind of fine tune it, if you will, which is what the book goes into. It goes into the 8 different things that I did. And then I've found all these other successful people who end up doing these exact, same things, to go from nothing to something, as I like to say.
Beautiful. Yeah, I remember a quote. I was watching boxing 24/7, and I can't remember which boxer it was, but they asked him, they're like, what do you believe in? And the quote, I remember that it always stuck with me. He said, I believe in myself. I have no choice, because it came from
Yeah,
like Mexico and like a slum. And it was just he had been at the bottom, and he just kind of had no choice but to believe in himself no matter what. Um,
absolutely.
so going back to your relationship, so was it just something that kind of, was it one of those situations where the relationship was kind of over before it ended, or was it one of those kind of things that it just hit you and it was just done overnight and your just whole life changed just like that?
Yeah, it was definitely not over before. I mean, like, we had been married for 8 years. I and everyone who knew us thought we were happily married. I mean, every couple obviously goes through stuff, and we had just gone through divorce. We'd lost our house the year before, and we had these tiny little babies at home. So it was a stressful time, I would say, but never in a million quadrillion years would I have imagined that would have ever happened to us. I was completely in a bubble, if you will. It didn't see a single sign. There wasn't even
So
a doubt in my mind until 10 minutes before I read his phone. I'd never even read his phone before. So it had never
wow.
even crossed my mind to be jealous of him or to ask him where he was, like, just never. It wasn't even in
So
my
within 10
sphere.
seconds, your whole entire life just
Yeah.
changed and you were just
Yeah.
rocked.
Like,
Wow.
literally would have never even thought to look at his phone in my life before 10 minutes before. And it was something so crazy that it was like, the second the thought came into my mind, it was like, oh my God, he's having an affair. And the proof is on the phone. It was like instantly, it was like 0 to 100.
Was it just like instant to check the phone, or was
It was,
it?
I really believe it was like some sign from God or from something. It was not anything in my normal intuition wheel, I would say, but it was something very much outside of me that was like, check the phone. And then when I did, then I was like, oh my God. To me, and to me, there was never any other options. Like, we were in a very committed relationship. We were each other's first boyfriend, girlfriend, you know, so I wasn't really about to just be like, yeah, sure, honey.
Well,
Do your
Sarah,
thing.
I have to give you props for like being able to make a change in a decision that quickly, because most people, especially who are in that kind of situation, they kind of step back and they think about it, and then a day turns into a week, and then a year, and then
And then they wind up still being miserable. So that
exactly. And
you
so for
know.
you to just make a change in like 10 seconds, it's like, holy crap, you're a very strong person for doing that.
Well, I tell you what, I definitely did not feel strong, but for me, and people have asked me, and they say hindsight is 2020, and I still wouldn't ever have done anything different. It was 100% a gut thing. It wasn't anything that I ever saw a different outcome for. It was just so black and white. It was so, unacceptable to me that there wasn't ever a different type of outcome. So, I think we're all given choices, opportunities, things that happen in our life, and each of us probably have our own line in the sand. And I think that was mine for sure.
So I can imagine like almost overnight you had to learn how to develop new habits and in strategies to get to where you are now. What were some of those habits that you had to kind of quickly adapt into your lifestyle for you to become successful?
Oh my God, the very first thing that I changed, without maybe even being super conscious of it, because I hadn't read a lot of self-help books. I didn't know much when it came to this stuff. But I had watched an Oprah show a couple years before where she talked about how our thoughts predict our future. And I didn't really know what that meant, but I knew that I had been very negative up to that point, and very, just when you're going through hard times, especially financial hard times, all you really want to do is bitch about it, right? Like, it just
Oh yeah.
seems like, and so I really realized that, oh my God, well, bitching about it and complaining about it never solved the problem. It just made everything worse. So maybe if I stop that and start focusing on what I want instead, maybe things will change. And just doing that changed the trajectory of my life. I mean, it was just absolutely everything, like putting an end to the negativity being spoken in my life, cutting people out of my life that were negative or that weren't supportive of the new path I was on. All of those things made a humongous difference in the fact that within a year and a half after he left, I was a VP of a software company. I was traveling first class. I was manifesting two of my vision boards in under 2 years. I mean, my life dramatically changed. It went from food stamps to 5-star restaurants in New York. So it was a huge shift, but I had to make the mental shift long before I saw like the physical outcome. And to do that, you've really got to watch what you're thinking. You got to watch what you're saying, and you definitely got to watch who you're around. Only surround yourself with successful people, I'm telling you.
Oh yeah, we'll definitely get into that. I definitely do want to touch on that, but good old Oprah, every day at 4.
Right?
I def-
She is actually the one, because she was playing in the background that day, and I wasn't even paying attention to the show, but that day I just remember her hearing, well, one of the things to catch your man cheating is if he's hiding his phone. So that was probably the voice of God in the back of my head that said, where's his phone? So see, it's all her.
It's kind of like that book, The Alchemist, as well. Just the omens, to follow the omens. That's one of my. I tell everyone that's the story about everybody.
I love that book.
Story. Yeah, it's probably like my Bible,
It
pretty
is.
much.
It's pretty amazing.
So speaking of vision boards, how important was having vision boards for you when you were dreaming up this life that you have now?
My gosh, I think I give so much credit to them, honestly, because back to Oprah. I think that same show, when she was talking about your thoughts, was like a follow-up on vision boards, and I had made one. This was way back when I was married, and my husband at the time was just like, oh my God, that's ridiculous. Like, we can't pay our mortgage. Why are you putting pictures of like Hawaii on here? This is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. And so I hid it and was like really embarrassed, and, like put it in my closet or something. But when I had my own house now and was like rebuilding my life or my apartment or whatever, I was like, no one can tell me this is stupid. I'm pulling it out. And then I thought, well, I'm at work all day, in this tiny little cube that's in the back office, no windows, no nothing. So I'm just going to take it to work because it's something pretty to look at, and it's better than looking at a blank wall. And that decision I really feel like was very pivotal, because in looking at it all day long, I started to build these movies in my head around each picture, where it wasn't just a picture of Hawaii, it was a picture of me on the beach with my kids in Hawaii. It was a snorkeling. It became this whole thing, so that when I was, on the phone doing my job, I would glance at it and this great little movie of a happy place would start playing in my head. And then when it really happened, about a year later, when I was on the beach in Hawaii with my son, there's this moment where you're like, is this deja vu? Have I been here before? And they're like, oh yeah, I have, like, in my brain every day at work when I was staring at this picture, forever. So, I mean, I manifested, like I said, 2 boards in under 2 years. It was incredible,
Oh, wow.
incredible. And we're talking like side-by-side picture comparisons, just really incredible stuff.
So
But I
what?
think it had a lot to do with being surrounded by it all the time.
So when you think back to those goals, you had posted on your vision board, what goals stick out the most that had came true?
Oh my gosh, there's been so many, and so many really huge ones, to be honest. I'll just give you one example that it might be one of my favorites. So this was 2011, and I was just getting on my feet, still struggling financially, but had the good job, and was trying to get settled. And I remember asking my son, where would you want to go if you could go anywhere, and what would you want to do? And he said, we'd just seen the movie Blind Side. And he said, I
Great
want to go
movie.
to a Ravens game, and I want to meet Michael Orr. And I was like, okay, anything else? Because I live in Oregon, that's 3,000 miles away. I'm thinking, okay, kid, like, way to shoot for the moon. But I put it on my board anyway, and I had like no clue anything. Well, about 9 months later, I wound up meeting an ex quarterback for the Ravens who said, hey, if you ever want to go, I'll get you tickets. And that turned into literally probably 9 months after I had put that picture on the board, my son and I walking out the tunnel of a Ravens home game
Oh, that's amazing.
and being on the field and looking up and seeing Michael Orr cross the field and walk up to my son and introduce himself to my son and say, so I heard, Kanan, you've been looking for me. And that right there, I mean, money can buy that. If I had all the money in the
What
world, I
was
couldn't have
that
bought
like
that.
when that came true? Was it just like, holy crap, I can't believe this is like happening right now? Like,
It is
what was that
like,
feeling like?
it's literally like being 5 years old on Christmas morning, where you just have that insane joy that you can't hide. You have this like giddiness that you can't control even if you wanted to. It's just, your whole body is buzzing, like your skin is electric. It's really amazing. There's actually, on my YouTube channel, I have 3 videos of that. And one, you're not supposed to video when you're coming out of the tunnel, but I had it on like silent videos. I'm probably going to get called out now, but it's up there. So you could actually see the moment when him and I walk out the tunnel onto the field. And it's, it's really amazing. And that was a moment where I looked at my son and I said, do you now believe anything is possible? I mean,
Wow.
literally, who would have ever imagined?
Well, you got to break the
So
rules sometimes. So you have those videos now for when your son gets older. If he ever is in doubt, you can
exactly.
always watch those videos and be reminded of what's possible.
Yes, 100%.
So, speaking of manifesting and vision boards, I remember when The Secret first came out. Again, I saw
Mm-hmm.
the interview with Oprah, and my mother actually started doing a vision board, and since then she's been doing very well for herself. But when it comes to manifesting your dreams, a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions about the law of attraction.
Mm-hmm.
What would you like to clear up for a lot of people who say, "Oh, I don't believe in that stuff," or
Yeah,
"I do believe in that stuff, but it doesn't seem to work"?
right. Oh, absolutely. I've heard both nonstop for 8 years. And the very first thing I say is, yeah, I tried The Secret, didn't work for me either, because it doesn't have anything about working in it. It just has, like, dream about driving a Mercedes, and one day you'll wake up and drive a Mercedes, and that may work for some people. It did not work for me.
Hmm.
So I really found that there were some big loopholes in that, that is really the reason why it doesn't work for most people. So, my number one thing is once you've identified what you want, you can't just sit around and do nothing. You can't just sit around and dream it will happen or think it will happen or send juju vibes out. Like, you got to get off your ass and make it happen. You got to start working towards it. And then once you do, the universe recognizes that effort and starts kind of putting what I call like magic into place, which is really what happened with the Ravens thing. I put it up there. I told my son we were going to go there, even though I didn't know how, and I busted my ass at work all the time, and so I was actively looking for the signs in the universe for when, it would start to come together. And then when it does finally come together and you're in that moment of manifestation, it feels just too easy. It's like, oh my God. So there's kind of that element that the secret skips to, but it misses all the steps in between, at least in my mind. And so for me, I mean, you've got to hustle. You've got to watch what you say. You've got to watch what you think. You've got to surround yourself with successful people. So there's definitely a method to it. But I think one of the things I started proving, back 8 years ago when I started this, I had a blog and I put everything out there, good, bad, or ugly, because I wanted to be a test case. And I wanted to say, if this works for me, it will work for anybody. And so, the stuff that I've manifested, I've shown pictures of my vision boards when I've first done them with timestamps, so no one can dispute, that it was on my board first. And then I've done a lot of side-by-side comparisons. So I've really tried to build actual proof and actual data points that if you follow my method, it is going to work, and it does work.
Yeah, see, that's in the hustle, a lot of people don't even realize. And when I talk about the law of attraction with a lot of people, I never bring up the secret, and I'm not trying to hit on the author or anything. But again, I refer to our favorite book, The Alchemist. Because in that story, he has a dream of finding the treasure, and he's
doing something about it.
Exactly. He goes on the journey, and bad things happen to him on the way there, but ultimately he gets what he's looking for. But had he never left and just kept sleeping and watching the sheep, that would have never had happened.
100%.
So was being on the Steve Harvey show and meeting Oprah on your vision board?
Meeting Oprah, yes, from day one. Absolutely.
So Steve was a bonus.
Steve was definitely a bonus. So in a way, because I always had this dream or vision of being interviewed on a talk show, Oprah is my guru, so it would be Oprah. But manifesting the Steve Harvey show, even though the topic was different and it was kind of silly or whatever, for me, it wasn't necessarily about the topic. It was about that moment that I had always imagined, of being interviewed, being on a live studio audience, being able to share my story, being able to hopefully inspire somebody. So for me, it was a direct manifestation. And then the crazy part of that is I actually was contacted by Sherry, who's Oprah's best friend, while I was in Chicago, who set up a meeting with their producers at Harpo while I was there. So it was the full manifestation for me, even though I haven't met the goddess yet, but I will someday.
Well, it's actually funny that you brought up how you always imagine yourself being interviewed on the Oprah show. Throughout every single tough period of my life, ever since I was probably about 13, I remember through any tough period, I always imagined myself being interviewed by someone and talking about it, and me wearing some fancy suit, and me being successful. And as a matter of fact, how I mentioned in the introduction, after listening to your interview on Andrew Farabee's show, Knowledge for Men, I have to give a great shout out to him. I actually said I'm going to, and I wasn't even doing this at the time, but I actually said I'm going to speak to Sarah Centrella one day because her story was just amazing.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Well, I gotta say, you're natural too. I can already tell. So you keep this up, and you're gonna be doing everything you ever dreamed you'd do.
I appreciate that. I really do. What was it like when you met them? Did they give you any advice to further your development?
Absolutely. And I think at that point that was almost 3 years ago, I guess now. This was long before this book was in play. It was before I had the method down, to an 8-step science, if you will. It was really when I was just kind of getting traction in just my story through my blog. And, I sat down with the producers and they were like, your story's insane. What you've manifested is crazy. But you need a platform, you need a book, you need something like that. And I remember leaving that meeting, and I already had kind of known that I had been trying to write my memoir for a couple of years and whatever. But I remember leaving that just so determined and being like, I'm going to get that book. I knew what my next step was. You know what I mean? So I never have looked at any of the opportunities that have come to me through the lens of being disappointed. Oh, I'm disappointed I didn't instantly get booked on Oprah. Well, you know, I wasn't anybody and I'm still not. So you know what I mean? Like, you've got to take your steps. You got to pay your dues. And so I left that going, oh my God, like, this is perfect. Now I know what my next step is. Now I know what I need to accomplish and achieve. And, so it was a great kind of motivation for me to do that. And, the book came out probably about a year and a half after that meeting. So it worked. It worked.
So when readers first open your book, they'll see a dedication to your Noni and your aunt. How have they been an influence in your life and throughout your process of writing this book?
Oh my gosh, my grandmother, my Noni, has been my my rock, my guru, my kind of everything. I call her my OG, my my original gangster, because she's a very strong woman. She raised 6 kids, and just was positive and light and loving and supportive and logical and just all those things that I always aspired to be. And she gave me such amazing support through ups, downs, goods, bads, whatever it was. And I actually was with her a year ago this week, actually, when she was passing, and the book had just come out, and I had just gotten my first advanced copy, not the final, but the one that goes out before that. And I was able to read to her the dedication. So it was really, really special. And, I can only pray and hope that I will be able to have that kind of influence on, especially other women in my life, for sure. It's a powerful thing.
Beautiful. So without giving too much away about the exact content in your book, can we at least break down at least 2 steps of your book? But first, I'd like to know how you came up with this 8-step plan.
Yes. So the 8-step plan was literally me at my kitchen table with a bunch of pieces of paper and saying, what's the first thing I did? When I was on the floor that day, what was the very first thing I did? What was the second? What was the third? And putting them together and then finding the flow for them. And it was probably about 2 hours sitting at the kitchen table and saying, oh my God, this is it. And once I put it together, that was kind of when I had the idea to say, well, if I did this, I wonder if the other people that I know that are successful, which by this time I had really made a conscious decision to have only positive people in my life who were doing things, who were following their passion, who were following their dream, who were successful. And then I realized, oh my God, pretty much everyone I know is successful. I wonder if they've done these things too. And that's kind of where the idea to interview other stories for the book came from, is really me just having conversations with the people that I knew, with my friends, the people in my life. A lot of them are NFL and NBA players, coaches, executives, fashion designers, you name it. And I didn't even tell them what I was doing. I didn't want to give away the 8 steps and have them feel like they were leading into it or anything. I just said, tell me your story. I'm writing a book. Just tell me your story. And every single time they told the story, all 8 steps would show up in the story.
Oh, wow.
And that's where I was like, oh, ding, ding. It wasn't just me.
Was it usually in the same order?
It comes in different orders, I think, for a lot of people. I think if anyone kind of sat down and thought, well, what was the first thing I did, it probably would come in pretty much this order, because I start off with dream it, to answer your first question, breaking down the steps. So the first step is dream it. And for me, I think that probably is a logical first step for almost everybody. You have to have an idea of what you want, right? You have to have a dream, or at least some sort of idea. When I started off that day with that little bit of hope, I didn't know my life would be this, but I knew it would be better, and I knew I wanted better. And the more I focused on that, the more I started to define what that dream looked like. But you have to have something. It has to be at least a spark. So that's the first step. And then the second, which is the most important in the whole book, I think, is think it. And that just comes down to what is going on in your brain, because whatever is going on in your brain, that's what your life's going to be. And that's a pretty crazy thing when you think about it. And then when you start to think about all the thoughts you've been thinking and you look at your life and you're like, oh, they do match. And if your life isn't what you want, you're like, oh, shit. Maybe I should change what I'm thinking.
It sounds crazy to people who maybe like when they're first introduced to the idea, but then when you even look at a lot of our most basic movements and needs, like when we're hungry, we think, all right, what am I going to eat? And then we go eat something, right? So
exactly. Or when you listen to a sad song on the radio and you think, oh, this is making me sad. And then, oh, shocker, 10 minutes later, you're sad. You know?
Oh, yeah. Well, I actually posted a status on Facebook about a week ago about, like, I love hip hop, and I'm not picking on hip hop, but, you know, a lot of the music is, especially nowadays, with the music coming out of Chicago and stuff, a lot of it's very violent. And I've been doing an experiment. The last 3 or 4 days, I've been listening to it like a lot. And usually my days, I start my day off, I wake up and I listen to a motivational video on YouTube, and then I'll read a book, and like I'll fill my whole entire day is filling my mind up with positivity. So the last few days I've been listening to a lot of like hardcore gangster rap, and I watched a movie called Chirac, just like trying to fill like, and this is a experiment that I'm doing.
See which one. See which one affects you.
And so the last 3 nights I've been having dreams of me doing drive-by shootings and just a bunch of weird gang. It is, and a lot of people think that it doesn't affect the reality when even my frequency and the way I feel throughout my day has even changed, and it's become very negative. But now I've kind of went back to my usual routine. I feel a hell of a lot better now.
It's very, very I think the reason why this chapter is so important is because, like you said, a lot of people don't know that they control what's going on in their brain. I did not at all until I started figuring this stuff out. And it was a shocking concept to me when I did. But then once they hear that you're supposed to control what's going on in your head, nobody tells you how, really. So that was very important to me to give very simple, basic how-to steps. And there's 3 tools that I give in the book that are so simple that if you do them for a week, you're going to feel like a brand new person. I mean, it's shocking. I coach people all the time. I've been coaching hundreds of people around the world, and to watch them go through this chapter and implement it in their life and see the changes that happen in their life, in their relationships, in everything, just by doing that one step is just, it's amazing to see. So that, if your listeners get nothing from this, just please watch what you're thinking. Focus on what you want. Do not give any mind space to what you don't, because whatever it is, good or bad, that's what you're like literally rolling out the red carpet to come into your life.
Well, I also wanted to ask you about your sex and dreaming. Let's go back there. So how important do you think it is for people alive to have a dream? And I'll give you a reason why I'm asking this specifically, because on the surface, many people would think that having a dream is common sense. Like, everyone has a dream, right? But in reality, you speak to most people only to discover they either really don't have a dream or they kind of let their dream die.
Absolutely. I would say that probably 85% to 90% of the people that I coach in my life coach practice come to me without a dream. And didn't even really probably know it. You know, at some point in time, they may have had one as a kid, but life gets to us, right? And then all of a sudden we're like, we don't even know what we want. So that, number one, I would say it's very, very common. And number two, I think it evolves over time with the type of work that we put in by doing the homework that's in the book. And that is to say, like, if someone comes to me with no dream and kind of a loss of direction, then what we do is we actually create the vision of the life they want, and that becomes, quote, the dream. And so that's really what it was for me. You know, I didn't know exactly in the beginning what I wanted it to be, but I knew I wanted that life. I knew I wanted a life where I could vacation with my kids, where I could, you know, drive a car that didn't break down, that I could, you know, do these things. And it wasn't ever about a bunch of materialistic things. It was about, you know, having a life that's full of family and friends and building out what that's to look like. And then the longer you focus on anything, the more it becomes clearer and more identified. And so that's how my initial, quote, dream for a different life became a dream to be a speaker, became a dream to be an author. All these other things have come as part of that, and it will for anybody. They just need to start with what it is they want. And then these other kind of significant dreams will find you. They really do.
Amazing. And I had listened to one of your videos, and you had mentioned that you started school in your late teens, and that you used to get made fun of because you weren't very good at writing, and people used to tease you and say, "Oh, you couldn't spell your own name."
Yeah.
So
I still get that.
So how was that transition? Like how did you gain the confidence to say like, I don't give a shit what anyone's gonna tell me. I'm gonna write this goddamn book. Like how, like explain that process, how you went from that mindset to now I'm gonna write a book.
You know, I've been getting shit for it my entire life. It kind of got to the point where I kind of knew that was my thing. I was gonna, even my CEO at my first real job pulled me in his office one day and was like, maybe you shouldn't send emails. And I was like, what? I don't understand. So yeah, I mean, I've always known that writing and definitely spelling and grammar were not my friends. And so when I first started my blog, I did not have my name on it. It was anonymous. And I was just writing for myself. I didn't care if anyone read it. And it went that way for about a year until it went viral. And my name was associated with it. I was like, oh shit. It's time to either step up and own this or like go crawl in a hole somewhere and get off Google. And thank God I made the choice to just own it. And so I will tell you that probably on a weekly basis, I either get a comment or a message or something where people are like, did you know that that's misspelled? And I'm just
Damn,
like,
grammar
listen.
Nazis.
I'm like, listen, it is what it is. If it bothers you, get off my blog. I don't know what to tell you. Like, I'm 41 years old. I'm not about to change it now. So yeah, I was not confident as a writer at all. And when I started writing, people really resonated with it and were very, very passionate about it. I was like, why? And I think the response was because you're real, because you write how you talk. There is no bullshit. You're not trying to pretend you're anybody you're not. I dropped the F-bomb in the first paragraph of my book. I mean,
Nice.
like, I literally, the book reads exactly like I'm talking on this conversation. So I didn't think anyone would dig it, and the opposite has been true. And so that has been a very big lesson for me, that when you embrace what you love, and it is something I absolutely love, and embrace how you do it, and don't try to be anybody that you're not.
Love it.
People really open their arms to you and embrace it. So you got to just own it, good, bad, or ugly.
Yeah, that's a very good example of just being your authentic self. And we're not always going to be the best at something, but it doesn't mean we can't be great at something. And it really shows just the power of words. Most recently, I've been inspired by Lin-Manuel's Hamilton, his play Hamilton,
Mm-hmm.
and just how the relation between him and the actual person, how they both kind of wrote their way up to success, kind of like how you did as well. And of course, with you, you said you weren't that great at writing. You had to learn to leave your comfort zone, and of course, that can be extremely terrifying for some people.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any words or do you have any words of advice or strategies that you'd like to share with our audience to combat or at least compete with the emotion of fear? Because fear is probably the number one thing beside laziness that I feel holds people back.
Oh, absolutely. I say in my book that fear is the enemy of success. So if you start looking at it like that, like every
I like
time
it.
fear comes up, it's your enemy. Like, its job is to destroy your success. Its job is to stand between you and success. So if you start to look at it in that lens a little bit, then you can kind of detach your own personal emotion with it and say, you're not going to block me. Sorry. Even though it's tough to walk through fear, it's always tough. Fear wouldn't be fear if it didn't trick you and come at you in these crazy ways that make you doubt yourself and doubt everything. But the more we're aware and the more we are paying attention to what we're thinking, the more we can see it for what it is and realize that its job is there to sabotage us.
I love
So
it.
it's up to us if we allow it or not. So, for me, fear is always there. It never goes away. There wasn't one successful person that I talked to that said, you know, whatever it is that they're venturing to do as the next thing in their life, their career, that there wasn't fear associated with it. There always is. But successful people step out on faith and disregard fear. I mean, I think fear does have an important job in that it makes you look at kind of the 360
The
view.
dangers.
Yeah. And I mean, it makes you make smart decisions. But as long as you know that its ultimate job is to destroy you, you'll be like, okay, cool. I checked off all the boxes. Screw you. I'm going through it anyway. So absolutely. I think there's no one out there who I have ever known who is successful and didn't face fear at one or all their junctures in their journey. It's just, it's part of the road to success. And the more you know how to move through it, the more successful and the quicker success will come for you. And just realize it's the enemy of success. So don't give it that credit.
Very nice. I remember UFC, former UFC champion Randy Couture. I remember there was a clip he was saying that, like what you're saying, like it's not going to go away. So what he had told someone who was training was that you have to compete with it. You have to know that it's not going away, and just every day you have to, like what you said, it's the enemy of success. You have to encounter it head on and just deal with it. From your encounters with people you may have spoken to or coached, what would you say is the most common reason why people who once had a dream kind of let go of it or think it's impossible to achieve? Fear. Especially that last part.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's really two things that derail people from achieving their dreams. And one is fear of success or failure, either one. You take your pick. I mean, I think both are just as dangerous. And for some reason, everyone is so terrified of failure. I mean, I don't know anybody who just woke up and was perfect and was awesome and, you know, started a business without a single bump or became Michael Jordan overnight without shooting free throws on his own time. You know, like, people have this unrealistic idea of what success is, that it's just this gorgeous little package that, you know, never came with any bumps and bruises. And that's not the reality. The reality is that, you know, all of us are out there and we're fighting through that no matter what. So I think most people quit because they thought it was supposed to be pretty and shiny and easy. And then when it wasn't, they were like, oh, well, it, quote, must not be, you know, meant to be, which is like the biggest crock of shit ever.
Yeah, the biggest cop out for not trying again.
Biggest crock of shit ever. So, you know, I think there's those two messages that are sold all the time. Like, if it's meant to be, it's, you know, going to be like roses.
It'll happen right away. Yeah, exactly.
Roses is perfect. I was like, no, sorry, it doesn't work that way. So I've always kind of taken the road to be as transparent in my journey as I could, because I wanted people to see how ugly it is. I want people to see how hard it is to work for what you want. I want people to see that it's not always walking on a red carpet or whatever the case is, or playing in the NFL on Sunday night. It's nasty sometimes. It's lonely sometimes, because I feel like if people knew the truth, they wouldn't quit. They wouldn't quit. They'd be like, this is normal. This is just a stage. This is just part of it. I'm okay. But because everyone's sold this bullshit lie that it's perfect and easy, everyone quits. It's like, no, you're just getting the wrong message. So when you read the book, there's 51 stories in there of real people. And in every story, I tell their hustle, because I want people to see how freaking hard it is and what they need to be prepared for if they want to be successful, so that they aren't discouraged.
See, that's what I love, how you were saying how failure, and I work with a lot of comedians in my area. I started a entertainment company for my little small town where there isn't really much things to do. So I got into this. I got involved with the community of stand-up comics, right? And they had taught me so much about life just from watching them go on stage. And I've seen them get laughed at. I've seen them get yelled at. I've seen people stand up and walk out. And then later on that night, or like the next week, I'd see that same person get up, tell that exact same joke, but they'd alter it a little bit differently, and the whole entire crowd would just be rolling and laughing.
Yeah.
But had they like quit, they would have never even gotten that laugh. So like, that was one of my examples where I learned that like you have to be willing, and I tell people this all the time. Like when you go and do something, you kind of have to be willing to just fuck it up completely.
Yep. Exactly.
and then just not worry about it. So I just thought I'd bring
Yeah,
it
and
up.
if it's something that you truly love to do, of course it hurts when it's not received the way that you want it to do, but you love it enough that you're going to do it whether anyone's listening or not. And that comes over time too. That comes over thinking about it, over obsessing about it, over working towards it. It doesn't happen overnight. And again, I think people are assuming that, okay, if I decide I want to be an NBA player, I'll give it a year or whatever. It's like, no. Most players I know have been at this since third grade. So,
Yeah.
like if that's truly your shit, then get out there and do it every waking minute for however long it takes until you get what you want. And also the other thing that I just want to say about success is I feel like if you follow formula, success is guaranteed. It might not be guaranteed in the exact way that you imagined it. It might come at you a little bit different. But as long as you don't quit, as long as you don't give in, the outcome will be there. It's a formula. It's like mathematics. It's a formula. And a great example, just real quick to give you from the book of one of the coaches that I interviewed. He's a coach for the Ravens, actually, NFL coach for the Ravens. And he had this dream. I mean, he always wanted to be a coach, but he had the dream to win a Super Bowl, right? And he had played in the NFL for, I think, 8 years or so. And, he finally gets this opportunity and he wins the Super Bowl as a player, but then because he had always dreamed of being a coach since he was a kid, to then go and win a Super Bowl as a coach is a whole different thing. So
Amazing.
It took a long time, though. He'd been in the game for years and years and years before this happened. So that's my number one kind of tip for everybody who's out there. Like, if you want it, you're gonna get it. Just don't give in. Don't quit. Don't let other people tell you some bullshit that isn't true. If you believe that's going to happen, it's going to happen.
I actually want to give an example as well before we move on to the next question. I'm from Canada, for those of you who don't know, and I live 2 hours away from Toronto. And I grew up watching Drake on Degrassi as a kid, like back in the 5th grade. And and I remember there was a station on Canada. It was a Canadian hip hop station called like Much Vibe, and he was like video like 263 and being like, especially how the way hip hop was back then. If you weren't talking about shooting or killing people, there was and you're from Canada, like
right.
That wasn't going to happen. And like a lot of people, especially Americans, don't realize like what makes and I'm not a fan of Drake, but what makes Drake one of the best rappers like right now is that he did something that was literally impossible in our minds, because it was always been a Canadian's dream to become a huge hip hop artist in the States. And I remember Drake, he was just like this actor kid, so at that time, for him to not only make it as a rapper, but to become huge without even getting a record deal or anything like that, and he was just on the map. And it's just a testament just how if you really want it and if you really do go for it, you will succeed, and you may even be bigger than you could ever imagine, but you don't know unless you try.
Absolutely. And you've got to believe in it. And I bet if I ever got a chance to interview him, I bet he would say from the beginning, he believed he could do it, even if everyone else tells you can't. And I had like 20 some odd publishers turn down the book. I've, talked to so many. I talked to all the big houses, and they were all like, oh, the book is great. The concept is great, but you're not famous. And you're just like, what the hell?
It's like, how am I going to get famous if you don't sign me?
And not only that, so you're blocking success for millions of people because the author isn't famous. Like, come on. But none of that even dented my determination. Didn't at that point in time, after working so hard towards a goal and knowing so clearly what you want as an outcome, it's just like you have armor on. You're like, whatever. And you just keep going because you're like, someone's going to get it. And all it takes is one person to get it, and you're good. So thank God they did.
So I'm really noticing a very common theme throughout your life, especially just from the beginning, how you just had to change everything within like 10 seconds, that you kind of had to just kind of keep thrusting through and kind of keep moving forward. And you have like this very strong will about you. And I can kind of feel it like radiating off of you as I speak to you. It's a very strong vibe, I guess would be the word I could only think of right
Yeah.
now. Um, yeah, so I just thought I'd just comment on that. But
Well,
you
thank
also
you. I
talk.
mean, it can be probably like a good and a bad thing, as strong women can tell you. There's you have higher expectations, and then it. I definitely would consider myself a strong woman by default because of when you've been through a lot of things and you got to forge through. You kind of do build that strength and build that armor. But I will tell you that on the day that he left, if someone would have said this would be my life, I could never have imagined it. So we are capable of so much more than we can imagine, especially at our low point. So every single one of us has it in us. It's just up to us if we want to listen to that or if we want to listen to the bullshit.
And the problem with strong people as well is that they're willing to take a hell of a lot more abuse than most regular people are willing
Right?
to. So
I'm a dartboard. Just shoot.
exactly, I can take it. And then
Right?
like it's like a few moments away from bleeding
Right.
out. They're like, okay, so I'm gonna move on. But so in your book, you have a section called "Change Your Crew."
Mm-hmm.
So tell me, did you start out with a negative circle before you were successful? And if so, did you how did you change your circle for your success to, I guess, come to life?
I think when I was married, I had a very, and I didn't realize this until it was over, but I was very much in that married life. You're home every day, you hang out with your significant other on the weekend or whatever. I didn't have a whole lot of crew, so to speak. I had
So lost touch with some of your friends and
I
stuff
had
as well.
family, and then we had some married friends, and that was about it. So when that was over, all of the married friends are like poof, they don't know what to do with you when you're not a married person anymore. So that was kind of gone. And then I think for my family, it was very hard for them to. No one knew me this way, right? Everyone knew me as part of a married couple. So I think for anyone who stayed around, it was tough. It was kind of like, how do you watch a train wreck? And not to say that. But it was, right? Like, how do you watch someone just literally try and struggle up from nothing? It's not fun to watch. No one really wants to sit around and watch that. So I think once I started trying to get my bearings, if anyone wasn't really bringing positivity into it, I just had zero time. I didn't, whether you were family or not, it was like survival mode for me. So I definitely went through a period where it was just me and my kids for a long time. That's why I started blogging, just for somebody to talk to. And then when I really started realizing that what I wanted to bring in were people who inspired me, that's kind of when I started opening myself up to building relationships with people who were doing what I admired. And that could be anything. One of the most pivotal relationships, and I talk about it in the book, was a friendship I struck up with now an NFL player. He plays for the Eagles. Excuse me, Kenyon Barner, and he was in college at the time, and I had the opportunity to meet him, and his energy was just so positive, and I really paid attention to kind of what he said, and I loved the way that he was living his life. It was completely the 8 steps of HBR, and that's kind of where I first started to say, well, if it's working for him in football, why can't it work for me in corporate life? Why can't it work for me in my home life as a parent or whatever? And I literally just started mimicking what I saw him doing and his attitude about life and his attitude about success, and just boom, I was like a sponge. I was putting it into practice in my life, and those relationships grew over time. And so, really, most of the people in the book were people who were my friends. Over time. So it was a decision that I made to only be around people who inspired me and who hopefully I could inspire back or whatever the case was, but people who I knew were moving forward, who were not there to throw shade or be a hater, or I just had no time for any of that shit. I was like, if you're not going up, you're not on this train.
What kind of tips do you have for people who may be in a similar situation or just really just need to make more friends and change their social circle? How did you end up meeting these people who are really successful?
Social media is amazing. It really is, and especially 6, 7, 8 years ago when it was newer than it is now. You could introduce yourself to just about anybody. It's harder now. People have more followers and things like that. But I had very first met Kenyon because on Facebook, I had cold called him and asked him if he would play football with my son for my son's 8th birthday. My son was a big fan of his. And I didn't have any money to give my son a birthday party. And I thought, well, it's a shot in the dark, but hey, I have nothing to lose, you know? And he was like, of course. You know?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was like, if you come down to Eugene, I'd love to, you know, come out to Park and throw the ball with him. And that friendship has, you know, changed so much in my life. And then for him to be in New York when we launched the book at One Oak this year was really, really amazing to kind of see how things have come full circle. So I would say just pay attention to the people in your life. Like, if you see somebody who is achieving things that you admire, sit down and ask them to go to coffee with you. Ask them to go to lunch with you, and just be open. Just say, you know what, I'm on this new path in my life, and I want to, you know, do X, Y, Z, and I would love to just pick your brain. Like, how did you start out to be successful? Like, what did you do? And people are so open to sharing when you come at them, no matter how successful they are. There wasn't anyone that I interviewed that wasn't open to sharing how they got there once they knew that I was genuine and eager to learn and was really receptive to whatever they had to say. And that would be my tip for everybody, is just, you know, pay attention, whether it's the owner of the company you work for, whoever it is around you that you see they're on a different track than everybody else. They're, you know, they have success, they have that good aura, they have that good energy. Take them to a coffee and just pick their brain, and I bet they'll be really open to it.
Yeah, see, me, sadly, when I was 14, I had to get arrested with me and my bunch of friends. We stole a car and went joyriding, and after that, I had to change my circle. But I kind of learned the hard way. So.
That's okay. There's a guy in the book who spent 8 years in state penitentiary for armed robbery, and he's doing amazing things right now. So wow. we've all had that lesson, good, bad, or ugly, right? At some point or another, you become your crew. So just take that into consideration. Like, and not only that, you're judged or elevated by your crew. So you might not even be like that, but if the people you're around are getting judged, you're right in that mix. So
yeah, that's what my mother used to tell me. She used to tell me that, and I never listened, but I learned that.
But then you learn the hard way, right?
Exactly. So before I enter into the closing questions, is there anything you'd like to touch on the book that we haven't already?
You know, I think hopefully people can go out and grab a copy. It's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all the kind of major bookstores you can get it. But the main thing I want people to know is that it gives the exact same 8 steps that I coach people one-on-one on. It has the exact same homework that I coach my clients with one-on-one on. So for $25, you can get what my clients get for $200 an hour. Literally, I wanted to be able to provide the exact same manual for people so that, you know, money would never be an inhibitor to knowing everything you need to know to change your life. And those 8 steps, if you do them and if you do the homework and you're diligent, it will change your life.
Well, and for those of you listening, there will be a link to all of Sarah's information from her blog to her book. It'll be right in the description in the YouTube. So I guess we'll head into the closing questions. So these are more personal questions I like to ask my guests, and I'm going to read a scenario for you. So you're walking down the street. It's just a regular day, and you happen to come across a young man or woman who is visibly upset. You stop and ask them if everything is okay. They respond with something along the lines of, I feel weak, hopeless, and I want to give up on my life. What words of encouragement would you give them in order to help them pick themselves up off of the ground?
I mean, the first thing I would say is I have been there. I have definitely been there. I know what rock bottom is all about, but you are so much stronger than you're giving yourself credit for. And really all it takes is a desire for a different life, and the rest you can learn. The rest you can be taught. If you have a desire to not give up and to have a different life, then I can show you how to do it.
Awesome. And who are your role models you looked up to in life, and why?
Probably my first one would have been my Noni, my grandma, because of her strength and because of her positivity. I think she was one of the first people that I was around that I really noticed was positive all the time. I mean, you never heard her complaining about anything. And that's not to say she was like Miss Chipper Cheery. She just didn't see the point of complaining. And she looked to solve problems instead of complain about them. And so those were really good lessons that I was able to have, the joy to observe. And then as far as a celebrity role model, Oprah.
Good choice. Good choice. And what would you do if you only had one day left to live?
Oh, man. I might jump out of a plane. I actually would definitely jump out of a plane.
Why not, right?
Because I'm terrified to fly, although I do it all the time, and I've always wanted to skydive. So put all that together, and that's the perfect last day.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Right?
And how do you want to be remembered when you die?
I would hope that people would say that what I've left behind has helped them. I think that would be an amazing legacy to leave. Was that people who didn't think that they could achieve whatever it is they wanted to achieve in life were able to do it because of the things that I've found out along my journey that worked for me, and that would be awesome.
And what do you have to say to the haters?
Hi. How's it going? Remember all that shit you told me I couldn't do? Guess what? Done and done.
I love it. So what's next for you, Sarah?
So now I am working on my second book, and I am working on an adaptation for a film version for kind of the whole story of my life, which is
Nice.
a memoir. Definitely some themes from the book will be in that as well. And then most excitedly, I am taking my kids on a 3-week trip to Italy, which has been a dream of mine since I was 16. So that's the short term and the long term kind of wrapped in one.
Wow. And is there any last pieces of wisdom or points you'd like to touch on before you go?
Don't give up. That is a cliche, but it's what I live by. And if you live by it too, then you're going to get whatever it is you're after.
Beautiful. Well, Sarah, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for
Thank you so much for having me, and I can't wait to see what amazing things are going to happen in your career, because I know they are.
I really appreciate it. You have a great night.
Thank you.
So everyone, that was Sarah Centrella. When I first heard her story, I knew I had to talk to her at some point. I wasn't even doing this at the time. I didn't know how or when, but I just knew that someday I would speak to her because that was a goal that I had set in my mind. And I was literally living off of pasta noodles and broccoli stalks, which I had already mentioned when I first started. And while trying to figure that out, what exactly I wanted to do with my life, I just never really because when you reach out to most people online, usually you're going to be greeted with like autoresponders. And when I contacted Sarah, honestly, she contacted me probably within like a few hours. And it was from that point I knew that she actually cared about what she does. And she actually cared about really trying to help people. So Sarah, if you're still listening to this, I want to thank you again for being exactly who you are, and for coming onto the show, and for sharing your story with us. And to all the listeners, I want to say thank you for listening. And I'll end the show with this quote by Walt Disney. Around here, however, we don't look backwards for very long. We keep moving forward, opening up new doors and doing new things because we're curious, and curiosity keeps leading us down new paths. Good night, everyone, and I encourage you all to hustle, believe, and receive. Until next time, take care.